Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. Today we are going to see Alex Soyman. He's got a weird head shape, eh? I don't know what's going on. It kind of looks like a carrot. I don't know if you can see it. Maybe like a radish. It kind of looks like a radish. But anyway, we're going to be listening to him make some arguments for atheism. I'm going to test myself, see if I'm able to effectively defend theism or Christianity in particular against his arguments for atheism. So let's get right into it, see what he has to say.
A new, fast-growing Christian YouTube channel, Redeemed Zoomer, put out a video promisingly called All Atheist Arguments Are...
Never lets him.
Right off the bat, this isn't really an argument for...
And it's had answers to theists have.
All right, so seems like what he's doing is he's making a response video to a theist video. And if we're being rigorous, even if you dismantled a theistic argument, that doesn't make atheism any more or less true. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, right? That's the common phrase. Basically means it doesn't matter how many arguments for Christianity or Islam that you dismantle, that doesn't count as a positive case for atheism. So I can point out all day why, atheism might be silly, or why, if I'm trying to prove why I'm so smart, it doesn't just work for me to point out why my opponent is so dumb. That doesn't make me suddenly smart, even if they're dumb, right? So it's strictly speaking, it's not actually an argument for atheism to simply point out why Christianity in particular, right, is not a good religion. Because you could be a Buddhist, right? And think about this, even if there was no good argument for Christianity, even if it was purely ad hoc, I just ad hoc said, I want to believe in God, and my worldview is that God exists. I have no argument for it, it's just completely ad hoc. I believe in the flying spaghetti monster. You've never seen him, nothing divinely revealed about him, but he exists, and prove me wrong. You can't actually rule that out as an atheist. That's what you would need to do, is make some kind of conclusive, provable point that definitively rules out the possibility of a God. Otherwise, both can be explained, right? You can explain the world with an atheist naturalistic worldview, or you can explain it with the flying spaghetti monster worldview, and they kind of stand at even odds. That's all I'm going to say.
A lot of arguments, but they never really think of anything new that the church hasn't had answers to for the past 2,000 years. So let's answer them. Religion causes wars. Well, actually, only 7% of all human wars were caused by religion.
Okay, first of all, this is stupid because whether or not religion causes wars has nothing to do with whether or not it's true or false. And this is also not true because what did all these secular atheist institutions do in the 20th century? They caused all these stupid wars. Communism killed way more people. Fascism, which was mostly secular agnostic, killed tons of people, right? So this whole idea religion causes all these wars is not true. It's also like, if you look at a lot of the wars that they'll point to, like, oh, look, it's the Inquisition. Oh, look, it's the Crusades. A lot of what you have is people want to conduct war for the sake of their own human nature. And there's also geopolitical reasons why they want to do war. It's not always because they disagree about theology, right? I mean, sometimes that's the case, but a lot of the times it's dishonest to frame it as only being about religion itself or theology. What you have are human beings with violent tendencies, or they want power, they want more power for their team, and maybe they're tribalistic, they kind of rule some other team as the enemy, and then they go to war, right? Or there's conflict. Maybe the conflict is fabricated by elites to create war. So it's dishonest to say that, well, it's religion and theological dogmatic disagreements that are causing all of these wars. That's not an accurate portrayal of how geopolitics actually works for the most part. A lot of it has to do with wanting more political power than it does disagreeing about theology. And human beings are just going to be tribalistic either way. And it has nothing to do with whether or not the religion is true or false. So that's not an argument.
And if you remove Islamic wars, that number drops down to 3%.
Right off the bat, this isn't really an argument for atheism, just for the idea that religion is harmful. Even if religion caused no wars at all, that's no actual evidence that any religion is true. Still, even if religion only causes 7% of wars, isn't it a problem that it causes any wars? The claim is not that religion causes all wars, or even most wars.
Well, not really, because what standard are you judging it against? If religion causes a little bit of wars, but atheism causes a ton of wars, then actually it's better than atheism, right? So you're like, oh, well, shouldn't it be zero? It's like, well, no, because zero might be an unrealistic standard to expect. And what's your standard of expectation for some kind of worldview? Like, oh, they need to have 0%. Well, atheism doesn't have 0%. You're just not accounting into the equation that human beings are naturally going to be violent. Whether you're a naturalist or a theist, people are going to have a flawed human nature that causes them to conflict with one another. And yeah, he's right. This isn't an argument for atheism or theism, so I don't know why it's in his video if it's not actually relevant to proving which side is true or false. So he's dismantling this other point, but okay, Alex O'Connor, you dismantling this guy's point does nothing to prove your case, right? You've just neutralized the battlefield. That's all you've done.
Wars. Just that it sometimes causes wars. I mean, to use a crude example, as far as I'm aware, National Socialism only ever caused one war. One out of the thousands that we have documented.
I mean, that's not... I mean, yeah, if you define the entire World War II as one war, I guess, sure, right? But there were also, individual mini-wars inside of it, so that's not really true.
But, of course, even if the vast majority of wars...
Also, did they cause the war? I mean, or were there multiple causes that caused that war, right? Like, was Russia maybe a cause? Was the central bank maybe a cause? Was Churchill maybe a cause? I'm just saying, right? Like, it's... But anyway.
...started for other reasons, it's still a problem that this caused a war at all. Not a perfect analogy, but you get what I'm saying. And it's worth asking, wherever there is a totally non-religious conflict, do you think that such a conflict would be calmed or exacerbated if we were to introduce religious conviction? Perhaps only the correct religion would make things better. That's fine, you can hold that position, but then even a believer can accept that many religions do often cause conflicts, or at least make them worse.
A lot of evil has been done in the name of...
Okay, well, here's the problem is everybody's going to have convictions, whatever side of the theistic aisle that they're on. So you might be a staunch religious believer, and that causes you to have these strong convictions that send you to war. But you can also be a person who's strongly convicted of atheism, and then those dogmatic principles in your worldview can cause you to go to war. So this idea that only... worldviews that involve a sky daddy are somehow they magically become worse than a worldview without a sky daddy, it's arbitrary. It's an arbitrary standard to say, well, if you have this dogma that involves a god, it's bad. But this dogma over here that doesn't have a god, but is equally dogmatic and equally as assertive and impositional and violent, that's not bad. That's an arbitrary standard you've set up for what type of dogma is okay and what type isn't. So you don't need a god to be dogmatic. And, just look at the 20th century, right?
Religion. This is true, but the most murderous people in human history have been atheists. This doesn't mean religion is true, it just means you can't use that as an argument against it.
I just want to point out that whilst religious violence is motivated by religious beliefs, atheist violence is rarely motivated by atheism. It's at best...
that's not really true, because atheism and atheistic worldviews are going to have within it beliefs that only come about because of the fact that they're atheistic. You can't believe in eugenics if you're a Christian. So you can say, well, they're not motivated by atheism, they're motivated by eugenics. Well, okay, but eugenics is only possible and comes out as an extension from their atheistic worldview, right? And it's also like, let's say you have an extremely violent jihadist Muslim who wants to go blow everybody up. That doesn't actually necessarily make it inherent to that religion, because there's other people who believe in the same religion who don't want to go around violently blowing everything up. So there's variance within the worldview, just like there's variance in atheists. There's some atheists who are violent, communist, Marxist, eugenics people who want to go kill everybody and topple the bourgeoisie and start the revolution and dismantle the government and kill everybody. There's also, violent extremist Muslims and, people who want to go conduct violence for their religion, right? But there's also people who are more temperamental, neutral, relaxed in their worldview. So there's variance on both sides. So this idea that, well, when they commit violence as a Muslim, it's because of their religion. I would say no. It's more like it's because of a variance or a particular belief that individual has about their religion. Because not every Muslim is running around. They all share the same religion, but not every Muslim is running around committing jihads. So this is a bad argument. And likewise, every atheist is not running around committing eugenics or trying to take over Europe or trying to, install another Holodomor. But we wouldn't suddenly say that all of atheism is therefore about eugenics or about Marxism, right? So all I'm asking is that you apply the same standard you would to atheism here, where you would say, okay, not every atheist is a Marxist eugenicist freak. It's not inherent to atheism. That's just a particular type of atheist. I'm saying, yeah, the same is true with religious people. There's some religious people who are extremist, violent people. And then there's some who are, I would say most actually, are reasonable, loving, God-fearing individuals who just want to worship God in the way that is appropriate without trying to kill everybody. That's most people.
It's permitted by someone's atheism, but then religious violence is also permitted by the person.
I also want to just point out that none of this is an argument for whether or not it's true. Let's say religion is causing all this violence. That doesn't make it not true. You might not personally like the violence, but that has nothing to do with whether or not it's true or false. Someone might start a jihad over 2 + 2 = 4, but just because there's a bunch of dogmatists who believe that 2 + 2 = 4 dogmatically, it doesn't make 2 + 2 = 4 false. It has no bearing on the actual truth or falsehood of the dogma, just because people act in a violent or convicted way based on the dogma. So it's completely irrelevant.
Person's religious beliefs as well as being encouraged by them. But okay, on the Hitler thing, look, I don't know what his religious views really were. Some say he was a Catholic, the religion he was baptized into and confirmed in. He did also write in Mein Kampf that, quote, "In standing guard against the Jew, I am doing the handiwork of the Lord." Not a particularly atheist state.
Well, he's being coy here. He's trying to suggest that Hitler was Christian. I mean, he definitely wasn't. I mean, he also has writings where he talks about it being Christianity being an extension of Judaism and therefore being problematic. And there's tons of other Nazis who were pagan or strictly atheists. So this, I don't know. He's like kind of mining for these cherry picked quotes, but because he won't commit to the argument that Hitler was actually Christian because he knows he can't make that case. So it's dishonest of him to even suggest it or see Hitler was kind of Christian. You see what I'm saying? Like it's dishonest. So he's here to make arguments, and here he is trying to he hasn't made a single argument yet. He's just trying to point shade and look, Hitler Christian. Like, come on, guys. Like, really, we're really making the type of argument where you just call your opposition Hitler and then throw your hands up and go absolute cinema and walk away, right? Like, come on.
But then Hitler was probably quite good at, well, lying. And perhaps the belief of some, even to this day, that he was a convicted theist is just a testament to the strength of his propagandic efforts. But if he was lying and didn't actually believe in God...
Keep in mind, all of this is irrelevant. Who cares if Hitler was Christian or not? That doesn't actually make a religion true or false, whether or not there's a bad guy who believes in it. This is like level 1 argumentation, right? Like, come on.
Then it's worth asking why he would think that lying about being religious would make his fascist campaign more successful. Whatever his own views personally were, he had every Nazi soldier wear belt buckles inscribed with the words "Gott mit uns," God with us. Clearly, even if he was personally an atheist, Hitler recognized that belief in a creator God can give people the confidence to do all kinds of evil.
If you were born somewhere else, you wouldn't be a Christian. Okay, and if you were born somewhere else, you wouldn't be an atheist. Everyone's beliefs are shaped by their context.
Well, this just misses the point. Sure.
It's also not an argument. I mean, it's completely irrelevant whether or not your belief comes about because of a particular culture. I mean, that has no bearing on whether or not it's true or false. Once again, if I'm born in Uganda and that makes me believe 2 plus 2 is 6, and I'm born in Uruguay and I think 2 plus 2 equals 5, and I'm born in Romania and I think it's 2 plus 2 equals 4, you could say, you only believe that because you're born in Romania. That has no bearing on whether or not 2 plus 2 equals 4, or it doesn't. So it's a form of a genetic fallacy where it's basically saying the origin of your belief, where it comes from, well, you're just born in England, so that's why you're Anglican. It's has no bearing on whether or not the position on its own merits is true or false. So it's a form of genetic fallacy, and it's irrelevant to whether or not, theism or atheism is true. It's not actually an argument. It's just stating motives. It's like saying you only believe 2 plus 2 equals 4 because you want to feel better than other people. It's like, maybe that's true. Maybe I just stumbled onto the right answer because I was born in Romania as opposed to Uruguay. But I could still be right. That has nothing to do with whether or not it's true or false.
All beliefs are shaped by their geography, but atheists don't claim that there's a God supervising the world who proactively wants everyone to believe in him. If such a God did exist, would we really expect him to reveal himself more strongly and reliably to, say, Americans than to Indonesians? It seems incredibly unlikely and unfair that your chances of being saved, of coming to...
Okay, well, first off, this would only dismantle a particular type of theism if it were true, which I can also show it's not true. But even if this were true, like even if I steelmanned his position and just granted his position or the argument he's trying to make, I would say that only dismantles a particular type of divinely revealed theism, right? So I could still believe in the flying spaghetti monster as a type of theism where there's been no revelation. He doesn't want people to know about him. He's a secret Illuminati god hiding in the clouds. That God is perfectly still plausible and completely bypasses this argument. So all you've done is you haven't proven atheism, you've only critiqued a particular type of theism, which doesn't do you any better in proving or establishing your position. Right? So unless you could rule out all of theism as an impossibility, then I could grant that that's an argument for atheism. But if you're just dismantling specific types of theism, that doesn't get you anywhere in establishing your position. I mean, we haven't heard a single positive case for atheism yet. We've only heard these minor, very nuanced, very irrelevant, fallacious critiques of particular types of Christianity or theism. It's kind of dishonest, and we haven't actually heard an argument for why atheism has to be true. Only, well, there's this problem in Christianity, and the Bible says this, and I don't like it, and Hitler might have been Christian, so like these are like nitpicking and complaining about Christianity specifically type arguments. These aren't actually positive cases for atheism, right?
Know the true God could be determined by where you happen to be born. If atheism is true, however, it's no surprise that where you're born shapes your religious beliefs, because that's what we think religious beliefs are, products of local mythology or political dominance.
I mean, I can also explain this. I mean, the thing is that atheism is not exclusive to the fact that people adopt whatever's around them that's convenient. Like, I could just say that as a Christian, too. I'm like, yeah, obviously I don't deny the fact that people are going to just react and glob onto what's politically dominant, right? That's very common. But I could also say at the same time that there's a lot of truth in Christianity because it is the truth, even if it's a bastardized version like Anglicanism or some Protestant goofy sect. There's still a lot of potency in that religion because it's true. And therefore, that's why Christianity spread across the globe and became the most dominant religion, right? And that every other religion is or the other Abrahamic religions are some deviation or branching off of the original religion, right? Muhammad is some weird heretical Arian Nestorian sect of Christianity that came out in the 400s, and Judaism is the individuals who rejected Christ when they were confronted with the the resurrection and the revelation. So most of the major religions today owe their roots to Christianity being the dominant force in the world. So you know what I mean? Like, it's not like we have a bunch of completely random pagan, Buddhist religions that are running around competing. It's like, no, even the other ones like Islam are directly correlated to, and very much related to the Christian moral system. So if you're just going to frame it as, well, people are just adopting whatever's dominant and kind of culturally relevant to them, you still can't explain why Christianity is so dominant, or why there's so many people who subscribe to it or spin off it with their own variations of religion. Unless, of course, it's true and there's a lot of potency and power and recognition that it's true from the people, and they gravitate towards it. So I think it's both and. I think Christianity is true. People gravitate towards the truth because the truth calls to them, and people are rational. They are made in the image of God. They desire the truth. They want what's true. And Christianity offers that. But at the same time, there's also political pressure. I mean, religious history is covered with tons of examples of religious pressure from, political leaders or neighboring threatening countries. Like, yes, obviously power politics are going to play a big role in forming what people believe, right? Because on one level, people want to believe what's true. They're convicted by the truth. That's the ideal state God made for us. But at the same time, people are also tempted with fear, with political pressure, fear of their life, what's culturally dominant around them. They're afflicted with peer pressure. So I can just say both of these things are true. One of them is the fallen state of man, being duped into bad positions by bad arguments, by temptations, by emotional appeals. And then the other one is like, yeah, the reason we see so much Christianity is because it is true. And there's another part of human beings that's rational and cares about the truth because they're made in the image of God. You actually can't really... You can only explain the diversity, which I can easily explain in my worldview as well. You can't actually explain the why so many people like Christianity. I almost never hear that. Why is Christianity so appealing or so dominant? Even if it's false, why would it be so dominant? If it's false and it's just, oh, you're this enlightened atheist and stupid people are believing in religion, then why is this particular religion so dominant over all the other ones? Right? I mean, because you can't say it's because it's true or because there's an element of truth to it, because that would be a concession. But the fact remains that it is dominant, and I don't see many atheists effectively, adding that to their worldview or explaining that phenomenon. But once again, let me remind you, all of this is completely irrelevant, right? And this idea that God would want to perfectly reveal himself to everybody, I mean, he kind of did. Like, Christianity spread across the whole world. He commanded his disciples to go proselytize and profess the gospel and go be missionaries. Like, this is all stuff that Christ explicitly commanded his apostles to do. So this idea that God didn't spread the gospel to the corners of the earth, it's like, yeah, he literally did, and that's called out in the gospel to go do that in Acts when he wants to start the early church. He's like, yeah, go spread the gospel around the world, and he literally did. Like, every country now, pretty much every country has encountered the gospel. The ones that aren't Christian are the ones that have rejected it. And it's like, yeah, God is going to give people free will. Like, if China and Japan want to be explicitly anti-Christian and they hate Christianity and want to kill missionaries who come there or whatever, right? I'm not saying they always did that, but that was a thing. There have been countries who have been explicitly rejecting of the gospel. Then, well, we're not going to be like Muslims. We're not going to go do a jihad and kill them and slit their throats if they don't accept the gospel, right? Eventually, you have to just say, okay, they've exercised their free will. They are not receptive towards the truth, the gospel. Shake the dust off your feet and go to another town. right? So to me, this just seems like Alex O'Connor wants to make these quick gotchas. He doesn't want to actually think about it or analyze it critically or see if the Christian apologetic has an effective answer to this question or actually think about the truth. He just wants to kind of lay down this quick gotcha and then just fuck off. And it's like, well, no, we do have an answer for this, and it's not just as simple as God didn't spread his, gospel around the world, and therefore he's impoverishing the random people on random Caribbean island. He's impoverishing their soul because they didn't receive the gospel. It's also like God is going to have mercy on people who didn't have an opportunity to hear the gospel. Like if you're born on some deserted island and you never heard the gospel or anything about Jesus, then yeah, God's going to apply a different standard to that individual on Judgment Day than he is going to be towards a Christian who has actively told the gospel and actively decided to reject it despite having full knowledge of it. So this is already accounted for within the worldview. It doesn't even work to dismantle it.
So yeah, if I was born in Indonesia, I'd probably be a Muslim. But whilst that's exactly what we'd expect if there is no universal God supervising everything and it's all just a product of local mythology, it's nothing like what we'd expect if there were a real universal God. By the way, I call this the genetic fallacy.
How do you know which...
Well, Goody called it out. But and this is also the fallacy, right? Because calling out a fallacy in somebody else's argument doesn't actually make your argument stronger. So you can say, haha, stupid theist, that's a fallacy. That's a genetic fallacy. That doesn't prove atheism. That doesn't do anything. Dismantling one argument a bad argument that a theist presents does nothing to prove atheism, because there could still be tons of good arguments for theism, even if a bad one is presented, right? So it's a fallacy because just pointing out when someone else commits a fallacy doesn't do anything to actually prove your side.
Which religion is true? Well, everyone, religious or not, has faith in a certain worldview. It's just that some worldviews are called religions and some are secular. But everyone has to ask the question of which worldview best explains the world.
Nothing to add here. Yes, every worldview should be justified.
There's no scientific proof that God exists.
Okay, well, if this is true, then religious worldviews are not inherently unique than atheistic worldviews. If you admit that, then earlier when you said religious worldviews cause violence, and it's only the religious worldviews that cause violence, and it's the religion that causes the violence, and the atheism, when they do violence and when they go kill tens of millions of Ukrainians and starve them to death and go kill millions of Orthodox Christians, right, and invade Eastern Europe and kill and slaughter everybody as atheists, or go do eugenics if you're Germany, see, that has nothing to do with their worldview as an atheist. That has nothing to do with their atheism. But when a Christian who's probably some corrupt, king anyway, who only kind of believes in the religion, and he does a war against the neighboring king, that's definitely because of religious dogmatism, right? See the stupid double standard?
Exists. Well, by definition, science can only prove things inside the natural world. And
true, the scientific method only covers things within the natural world. So postulating about metaphysics or supernatural phenomenon is actually impossible. Just like I said with the flying spaghetti monster, there could be a flying spaghetti monster out in the world that never interacts with the real world. He has no divine revelation of his existence, but you can't rule out his existence, which is what you need to do to prove atheism, right? Because you say there is no God, and this flying spaghetti monster, there might not be proof for him either way. He could exist, and if he could exist, then atheism could be false.
By definition, God is something outside the natural world. So science can neither prove nor disprove God.
That's fine if you want to say that science has nothing to say about God, but you've just undercut a great deal of natural theology. You're disagreeing with it.
Yeah, I don't like natural theology. That's a Catholic. We believe in divine revelation as the epistemic principle. So yeah, go ahead, tear down. Yeah, I think the reason we have so many atheists is because, like Destiny, like this Alex Goober, they start out Catholic, and then they want all this natural theology to work. They want science to confirm God, and it's like, no, you can't, because the philosophy of science and metaphysics has to come before science, before we do the scientific method. And that's why the project of natural theology doesn't work. And then when the smart Catholics figure out that natural theology doesn't work, they think, oh, well, I should just become atheism then, because the only thing proving Catholicism or Christianity was this natural theology. So, yeah, I actually agree. Like, propping up your belief in God on a natural theology worldview is a bad idea, because you're setting up a bad foundation. And when they become smart enough, if they become smart enough, they might realize it's a bad foundation, and then they might just throw the entire religious enterprise out the window like Turnip Man.
Everybody who tries to prove God's existence with the fine-tuning argument, or the Big Bang in the Kalam cosmological argument, irreducible complexity, arguments about the genetic code, indeed, even the historical argument for the resurrection of Jesus, these just automatically cannot work in establishing God's existence, since material investigations can't bear on the supernatural. Well,
or the metaphysical, right? You can't justify metaphysical assumptions, presuppositions with historical observations, with evidence gathering or facts or empirical observations, right? So I'm glad he admits that, but then how is a naturalist, how are you supposed to prove naturalism as a system by only using natural observations, right? Or empirical observations? It's basically the empiricist defeater. I think it's naturalist fallacy. I forget what it's called. But basically, if all truth is derived from sense data, then where in sense data are you going to find the principle, the universal, meaning everywhere principle? How are you going to prove a universal principle using sense data? That's impossible. You can't prove a universal from individual instantiations, individual instances of sense data. That's absurd. So now that he admits that empirical observations, historical evidence, or facts is not going to be able to prove theism or atheism, okay, then what tool do you have left at your disposal as a naturalist, right? I'm just baffled at what he's really going to try to argue next, because this seems to be the major intellectual hurdle that most atheists never get over, is that you can't just stack up empirical observations and evidence to prove or disprove God. It has to start with things that are prior order to doing the scientific method itself. I would say metaphysics. I mean, you could also do ethics, right? You could do presup, right? But okay, so where's he going to go from here? Because that's basically all of the naturalist talking points just cut out if he really admits that.
This is fortuitous. Literally, as I was recording this video, Redeemed Zoomer released a new video called All Arguments for God, Explained in 10 Minutes. Now, given that he's just said that science can never bear on the supernatural and can't prove or disprove God's existence, just take a listen to this.
Things in nature, like the human cell or the ecosystem of the world, are very complex and they work like a machine. Now, Darwinian evolution can explain why that is, but there's also things Darwinian evolution can't explain, like the 4 constants of the universe. There are physical constants like the gravitational constant and the electron charge, the strong nuclear force and the weak nuclear force.
Yeah, true. Well, I don't know if he's going to make the providential point, but the naturalist can't prove or even assert with justification. They can't make the claim with justification that the universe is going to operate consistently. That all of these things, like the gravitational constant, like all these values and all these formulas, these physics formulas that govern the behavior of our universe, there's no proof or no reason to believe, if you're just a naturalist, that any of this is going to remain consistent. That suddenly we're going to wake up tomorrow and the universe isn't going to be completely different. The sun isn't going to be purple because the behavior, the properties of light fundamentally changed. There's actually no proof. And if there's no justification for that, there's no justification for doing science at all, because science relies on the observations we make today ringing true across multiple experiments and tomorrow, and being valid in the future when someone reads our scientific paper about what we discovered scientifically. It also has no bearing on the past. If you're using geometric data or radiation to try to prove, I don't know, evolution, you're making the assumption that the rules that govern today are the ones that governed rocks millions of years ago, right? So, I mean, is he going to make that point? I don't know. Let's see if I don't think he is, but let's see.
That are perfectly fine-tuned, such that if they were even the slightest bit different, the entire universe would immediately collapse in on itself.
Sounds pretty, I don't know, scientific, doesn't it? So it seems like when an atheist is arguing that science disproves God, no, science and religion are totally separate, non-overlapping magisteria. But when it comes to proving God's existence, hey, look at these finely tuned constants. Isn't that amazing?
There's no evidence of...
Well, no, I mean, Alex O'Connor is just misunderstanding what Radim Zoomer said. Radim Zoomer said that there's the domain of the natural and there's the domain of the supernatural. Science can't venture into the supernatural. I mean, God can definitely venture into the natural world. That's divine revelation. He actively created and inspired a text which we have in real life. That's a physical, real, material thing. That's what we would use as our epistemic principle for God. And it's like, so he's misunderstanding, because there can be examples in nature that could or could not reveal or point to the divine, but there's nothing that the science in the natural realm can do to enter into the divine. So if you have two camps, on the left you have naturalism, the natural realm, and on the right you have the supernatural realm. God can step into both realms. He can venture into the natural realm, do some stuff, and then he can also exist in a transcendental, outside of the created order, heaven realm. Science can investigate the natural stuff, but they can't go anywhere into the supernatural realm and investigate that. What does this mean? That means that you could prove theism. You could prove it by investigating the natural realm and finding examples of the divine in the natural realm. Examples where God stepped into the natural realm and imposed some kind of proof of his existence into the natural realm. That's possible. What's not possible is to rule out the existence of God in the supernatural realm. The best an atheist could even do is say, we've ruled out the possibility or evidence thereof of God in the natural realm. But you still can't disprove him in the supernatural realm, because maybe he just hangs out in another dimension and he just doesn't interact with the universe at all. So you actually, and this is ultimately why I think you can't prove atheism. The best you can do is point out why arguments for God based on stuff we see in the natural realm doesn't work to prove God. All you can do is dismantle natural theology type arguments. You can't make any statement about the domain of the supernatural. That's what Radim Zoomer is saying. So he completely misunderstood there.
Of anything supernatural. Well, that's just not accurate. There are medically documented cases of people with demonic possession speaking in languages they don't know, for example, and people with near-death experiences get...
And this counts as a form of evidence. You might think it's not, enough evidence. You might think, well, they could be lying, the evidence could be fabricated, but this does count as a type of evidence, right? First-hand accounts of things that are impossible to explain in a naturalist worldview, they do count as a form of evidence. You might think it's pre-lest, or you might think it's not real. You could explain it away as, well, I can explain away this evidence as simply being, people being delusional or whatever. But it does count as a form of evidence, right? It's not proof. It doesn't definitively prove it, but when atheists say, well, there's no evidence, it's like, yeah, there is evidence. It's just not conclusively proving evidence.
Getting information they never had access to.
Okay, medically documented cases of people with demonic possession sounds awesome. I would love to take a look at that, medical documentation. I get the feeling you're not going to provide any, are you? Fear not, we do have one source that was flashed on screen.
Well, I mean, so he's basically, well, it doesn't match up to my standard of evidence. Sure, but that doesn't get around the fact that it's still evidence. I mean, somebody didn't observe it with a microscope and go in and, oh, like, I don't know, even know what they would expect to find, right? Like, this is kind of the whole point, is like, demons or demonic possession is not going to be something that you can investigate or get proof of in the natural realm. Like, you're not going to be able to be like, oh, look, we found the chemical of the soul. This is the molecule of the soul. We found it. This one is a evil glowing red molecule, therefore it's a demon. It's like, I don't know what you expect. Like, this is just annoying because these types of discussions don't go anywhere, and none of this is proof for atheism or theism. So it's annoying.
A book by Richard Gallagher called Demonic Foes. So, okay, I bought the book. I only skimmed through a couple of chapters, but I did also watch a few of Dr. Gallagher's interviews. In the book, he talks about some of his experiences with people he believes were demonically possessed, including a woman he calls Julia. Evidence for demonic possession consists principally in people like Julia having special powers. One night, Dr. Gallagher heard his normally peaceful cats screeching and fighting with each other. And the next day, he meets a woman he calls Julia, who says, "How'd you like those cats last night?" Weird, for sure, but not quite yet the medical documentation that we're seeking. So then, what other special powers did Julia have?
Okay, he's going to go through and he's going to hyper-critique what is probably, yeah, I mean, it could be just spooky, right? Might not be supernatural, but keep in mind, none of this does anything to prove atheism. None of this. This is just like, oh, look, someone tried to prove Christianity using demonic possession. I'm going to go and nitpick every little thing about this guy who is just trying to make a New York Times bestseller book and just wants to make a bit of money. It's like, it's not that deep. Like, yeah, this guy might be a loon. He might be crazy. Maybe he's true, but none of this proves atheism. You can dismantle 1,000 Christian or Islamic books all day you want. None of that does anything to actually prove atheism. All you're doing is picking apart what are bad evidences or bad arguments for the opposition side. That is nothing to build up your own side or prove your own position. So this is like a fat section. I'm going to skip past it. I mean, why don't I just look at it? Because he's just going to yap, and this is a giant video. So he says, okay, demonic possession. Demonic possession does nothing to prove, yeah, there might be bad accounts of demonic possession. Think about this. He said every argument for atheism. He brings up all these Christian talking points. Demonic possession. Okay, that's a argument for Christianity, right? So you dismantling an argument for Christianity doesn't actually prove atheism. So the very title of this video, he called it Every Argument for Atheism. And then he has, I'm going to nitpick every single Christian argument that I nitpick personally and don't like. I'm going to ignore all of the philosophically heavy ones, and I'm just going to go for like super low-hanging fruit, like demonic possession books on Amazon from like 80 IQ evangelical Protestants. It's like, okay, yeah, you could do that, but that doesn't, even if you did all of that perfectly and it had no flaws in your methodology or your dismantling, that does nothing to prove atheism. None of it. So let's go through them. The Bible has contradictions. Oh my gosh. Well, guess what? There's other religions than the Christian one. So even if you could prove that the Bible has contradictions, which you couldn't, but let's say you could, right? And most of it is a misunderstanding when they say, oh, it contradicts here. Okay, you just don't understand what the Bible is saying. Like, he says here, love your neighbor, but then he does this thing over here. Oh, it's a contradiction. It's like, yeah, because you don't understand the context, or you don't understand the specific way in which it's supposed to be read, or you're just dumb. So most of them are like, well, it looks like a contradiction to me. And it's like, that doesn't make it a contradiction, right? Just because you personally don't understand it or you don't get it doesn't make it a contradiction. It just means you are being lazy or you haven't investigated the text thoroughly enough to actually get an answer on this particular verse that you have, a problem with. Once again, this wouldn't prove atheism. Like, so what? Even if you could disprove that the Bible was fake and it's contradicted and it was made up by a dude in a hut somewhere in the year 300, like, all you would do is you would just disprove one religion. That does nothing to disprove Islam or Judaism or Vishnu or any other religion, right? So, bad argument. The Gospels are anonymous. Once again, this is a Christian-specific deconstruction. Does nothing to actually prove atheism. This is how dumb people are. They don't get that, like, you picking apart a particular position does nothing to prove your own position, right? Like, because it could just be the case that, I mean, with the Bible contradiction, it could just be the case that Islam is true or something, or that the specific translation of the Bible is false because it's not approved by the church. It's made up by some Protestant church and they translated it wrong, and then you only disprove that specific Protestant translation of the Bible wrong, not the Orthodox Church. So it's just dumb. And what's this one? The Gospels are anonymous. Let's see.
But we literally have writings from church fathers who knew the apostles and can verify that they indeed wrote the books named after them.
Okay, the consensus of New Testament scholars seems to be that we don't have sufficient evidence.
Appeal to consensus, appeal to authority. So two fallacies in one.
For the traditional authorship of the Gospels. But what was it that you just said?
But the point is that the authorship of the Bible is upheld by the tradition of the church. That's how we know who wrote the Gospel of Matthew, for example, is because we have a tradition, an oral and a written tradition of the authenticity and the authorship of these Bibles dating back to the early church. So the tradition of the church is the proof or the quote-unquote evidence that for the authorship of the Gospels.
We literally have writings from church fathers who can verify the traditional authorship of the Gospels. You've shown a picture on screen of St. Ignatius of Antioch, who, look, I don't know very much about, but I think you've basically just lied about him. We only know anything about him at all via his letters and tradition. Tradition which states he was a disciple of John, but with very patchy evidence. Some of Ignatius's followers wrote an account of his martyrdom that says he was a disciple of John. So, sure, maybe Ignatius knew John. But where...
Okay, but you just said he lied, and then you just pulled up the quote where it confirms he knew John. So what do you mean?
the hell have you gotten this idea that Ignatius can verify John's author?
This is so dumb. I mean, like, what, are you going to go... Do you want to ask Ignatius of Antioch yourself? Right? He doesn't understand the whole point that the tradition, the preserved tradition of the church is what preserves the authenticity and veracity of the claims of the church. It's like, well, you didn't talk to Ignatius. You don't know that he knew John. It's like, yeah, because he's dead. But the people after him wrote that he knew John, which is the quote you just brought up right here.
Authorship of the fourth gospel. Even in the letters Ignatius allegedly wrote to John, now recognized to be forgeries anyway, we don't have any clear endorsement from Ignatius of the idea that John wrote this gospel. It seems that Ignatius's epistles were influenced by the theology of John's gospel, so he probably read it, but that's a far cry from making any commentary about its authorship. For the record, church patristics is really not my area. I don't know very much here, so don't look to me for advice.
So then why are you talking about it, right? Because, yeah, this is like, well, academic scholars say, yeah, so you don't really have an argument for this. You're just, I mean, you dismantled like one forgery and then you think that like proves your whole case. I mean, oh, look, I found a Catholic forgery. Does that disprove all of Christianity? Or does it disprove, it wouldn't even disprove Catholicism if you found like a couple forgeries. Like, so what? There can be bad actors who write forgeries, or there can be bad dissertations or bad proofs for things. There can be saints who make mistakes. None of this, like, this is so dumb. Like, none of this disproves the religion.
Advice on this. I actually reached out to one of my old theologians.
Okay, the Gospels misquote Jesus. So this is so dumb. Literally every single point is going to be, he thinks this is an argument for atheism. He's just going to go through critiquing the Bible. Let me go through critiquing specifically Christianity and every little nitpicky thing that I can find that I don't like. Oh my God, literally. Jesus never claims to be God. Okay, mythological development.
It makes Jesus seem, so we can extrapolate that Jesus was originally a human figure who got made more divine over time. Alright, maybe some Gospels emphasize Jesus' divinity. divinity more than others, but what about Paul's letters that fully confess the divinity of Jesus and were also written before any of the Gospels? So that breaks your pattern.
Yeah, sure. If the claim is about whether the authors of the Gospels thought Jesus was divine, I have no problem saying that the earliest Gospel, Mark, seems to imply that Jesus is God from the very first chapter. The more interesting point, however, is not that later Gospels make Jesus more divine, but that they provide more evidence for his divinity as time goes on. The earliest copies of Mark contain no post-resurrection appearances. Matthew and Luke contain some post-resurrection appearances, and John then contains...
I don't even know what this is. This isn't like an argument. You could say, well, the evidence that... I mean, that doesn't even make sense because, like, evidence... You would expect evidence to be closer to the event. But I don't know what this would prove. I mean, just because the authorship of a gospel is... It's just weird. I don't even know what to make of this. But, okay, let's say he was right. Okay, so what? I mean, one theory is that they made it up, but even just having, like, this... Even the just because you could prove the possibility of this mythological development theory, it doesn't prove it true. And even if it was true, it wouldn't disprove all of religion. It would just disprove a specific tradition of religion or a specific Christian religion, right? It wouldn't disprove all of religion, so this is so dumb. The Bible's... Oh, my fucking idiot. The Bible supports slavery, yeah. Okay, well, on what grounds is slavery wrong? Where do you get your ethics? 99% of people say it's subjective, it's made up, it's in our laws. Like, people are so dumb. Like, I don't even know. He really thinks this is an argument. Like, well, if the Bible's true, then why does it support slavery? It's like, okay, so you could go to a patristic father. You could go to... There's tons of videos, Catholic and Orthodox, explaining why there was slavery in the Old Testament. It's just... Like, the fact that there are still people who think this is like a defeater and they haven't... Like, they're so lazy, they won't even go investigate any of these questions they have. They go, well, the Bible hates trans people and gays and slavery. And it's like, okay, well, you just don't understand. And even... So what? You personally, subjectively don't like slavery. That doesn't make the Bible false. Maybe you're just an idiot who was born... I mean, you earlier in the video, you said that you only believe in theism because of the country you're born in. You would have been an atheist or been an Islamist if you were born in a different country. I can say the same thing here. Oh, the reason you have a problem with slavery is because you're born in the 21st century. If you were born in the 15th century, you would have no problem with slavery. So you're just reflecting the subjective made-up value system of the country, time, and circumstance that you're born into. So there you go. Let me just use your own argument against you. Okay, the next one. Slave Bible. I don't know what that is. I'm not even going to look at it. Christians supported slave. Oh my gosh. Yapping. God kills people. So what? Atheist countries are more prosperous. Really? Is that so?
True that Northern European countries are very prosperous and very secular, but correlation doesn't equal causation. It's not like atheism causes prosperity. It's that prosperity causes atheism because when people have comfortable lives, they don't feel a need to depend on God.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I mean, it's also dishonest to weaponize the word prosperity because prosperity is going to be measured on secular metrics anyway. It's going to look at, well, like material well-being. It's not going to look at things like that, Christians would care about in terms of the spiritual domain. So the problem with this argument is it just asserts the very secular, very humanist, very material definition of prosperity as the ultimate measuring stick of success for a country. Where I would say if you're an atheist and you don't really have any grounding for ethics at all, you have no reason to assert any measuring stick over another measuring stick. Why don't we measure the amount of infant deaths as the ultimate well-being of a country, right? So trying to assert things like prosperity and well-being when you have no grounding for your ethics at all, period, it's like, yeah, I'm not going to let you do that. It's also like I, as a Christian, can just say, well, they have material prosperity, but there's something more important, which is the well-being of your soul. So, yeah, I mean, we know from the Bible that it's going to be very hard for the rich man to enter heaven. Sell all your possessions, follow me. Being distracted with material, pleasures and distractions is going to make it a lot harder for you to be virtuous and focus on your faith. It's a distraction. So the Christian worldview already integrates this in a way that makes sense, which is as you get distracted with material, worldly things, you lose sight of the faith, and this is actively warned against in the Bible all the time. So this doesn't do anything.
But why are these particular...
Okay, next. I just believe in one less God. Let me see. There are 4,000 gods. You're atheist. Okay, that's irrelevant. Who created God? Nobody. It's dumb. Really, science disproves God. Let's see it.
The church invented modern science. All the founders of the scientific revolution deeply believed in God, and medieval theologians laid the groundwork for modern science by saying the world was governed by an intelligent creator. That means we can understand the world with our intelligence. And studying God led to studying the world because the world is God's creation.
I've talked about this before too.
Which, yeah, that's a valid point Redeem Zoomer makes, although he didn't really articulate it definitively enough. He's talking about the metaphysics that underlie doing the scientific method. We're rational, therefore we can investigate the natural world. The world is providentially governed by God, so it has regularity. It has an intelligible design because it's made in the image of God. Right? So what he's talking about is like the epistemic principles and the metaphysics that lets us actually do the scientific method, which need justification in of themselves, which the atheist can't provide at all. So, I mean, he didn't really say that, but so I guess Turn Up Man is just gonna completely blow right past that and not understand the broader philosophical critique. But sure, let's hear what Tomato Man says.
Sure, the founding fathers of science were religious, but who wasn't back then? And even if they weren't religious, we'd never know about it, since even expressing unorthodox cosmology, let alone atheism, was enough to...
Right, so yeah, genetic fallacy. All the people who invented science were religious. Yeah. Once again, doesn't prove religion, doesn't prove atheism. God of the gaps. Problem of evil. The problem of evil is not a problem if if we're just all evolved monkeys who just do what's good for survival, then there's no evil or problem of evil to assert at all. So I don't even know what the problem of evil is. I always hear this. It's like, well, why bad thing happen? It's like, because sin entered the world. I don't know what to tell you. Like, the world is in a fallen state. Is it that hard to understand? Like, what it's like an emotional appeal. It's like, my dad got cancer. Why would God do that to me? Yeah. It's like, because sin entered the world, and we all sin, and we live in a fallen world. Before the fall, it was perfect. And then Adam and Eve sinned, and then sin and death entered the world, and now we live in a sin and death-ridden world. And now we sin. And now we have temptation. Now we have demons. Now we have Lucifer. So it's like, I don't even understand the problem. It's not really philosophically a problem at all. So let me actually hear what they're going to say.
The Christian idea that human beings are corrupted and evil. Of course, all of us constantly fall short, even of our own moral standards. Fine, so destroying evil requires destroying us. But you've just said that God will one day destroy all evil. He just can't do it now, because that would mean destroying humans. But what will change so that one day he can destroy...
I don't know what this is. This is some stupid Redoom-Zemer Presbyterian Pentecostal goofy theology that, I mean, evil doesn't have an ontological existence. It's a deprivation of the good, of God, right, as the source and fountain of all good. So there is no, we must destroy evil. This is not like a thing, right? I mean, we will be deified on the last day. We will become like God, restored, right? So I don't know what he's talking about.
Evil without destroying humans. And why can't that happen now? As far as I was aware...
What can happen now? It's not an argument. How do you know that God isn't evil? So he did get it. Evil isn't a... Okay, so goofy Redoom-Zemer. What's he
It's
gonna
just
do?
a lack of good. And for good to be objective, it needs to come from God. So a God who is objectively evil is logically impossible.
Yeah, sure. If you think that evil is just a privation of good, then I guess there can't exist a maximally evil being. I suppose I'm just unconvinced by that analysis of what good and evil are. But maybe you're convinced.
I'm unconvinced. I'm unconvinced. You see, you made a pretty good argument there, buddy. But I'm unconvinced. Yeah. Good luck convincing me next time, buddy. Alright, Oh, can God create a rock so heavy? No way he actually put that there. Can God make a rock so heavy he can't lift it? No. Why does evil exist? No. Religion is just wishful thinking.
We all suck.
Well, not if Nietzsche's right, for a start. Think about this. For a great many people throughout history, who Nietzsche calls the slave class, they've...
Oh my gosh, this guy's so dumb. This is so dumb. It's like, you can have a theory for... You can have a colorful, creative counter-explanation for why human beings do what they do. But first of all, like, I don't even know where to start with this. Like, first of all, how do you prove that Nietzsche's right? You said if Nietzsche's is right. And then, second of all, it's like, what would that do? What would that even do? It's like, this is so dumb. It's like a counter theory for how human beings work. Is that, well, they just invented slave morality. It's like, okay, can you prove that though? Well, no, it's just a theory. No. So it's like philosophical pontification of what they think is the case. Yes, I know all about slave morality and master morality. That doesn't prove slave and master morality as being true. It's just a counter explanation you've just asserted. There's no proof for it. It's just, you just made it up, which is so ironic, right? They think the way you go about argumentation is you just make things up because they think Christians are just making things up. So then they say, well, I'm going to make up my own story of why human beings do what they do, which is just slave and master morality, right? So it's like, none of this is good argumentation. Psychology and neuroscience explains religion. Well, it can explain why human beings engage in religion, or it can analyze, like, but that doesn't mean it doesn't make religion true or false just because there's a science of, like, a neuroscience explanation of religion. None of that actually proves religion.
So what? If God is real, we should expect there to be some psychological or social benefit to believing in him.
Again, I more or less agree with this.
Spiritual experiences can be explained by brain chemicals. Well, romantic experiences can also be explained by brain chemicals, but that doesn't mean your wife isn't real. So spiritual experiences being explained by brain chemicals...
Yeah, really good point. So just because you find a naturalistic explanation for things, it doesn't rule out the possibility of them being divinely implanted, or there being also a divine plane of existence overlaid on top of the natural. So atheists think this is an argument for atheism. Well, if I can just find a counter explanation that is naturalist, then suddenly that proves naturalism. No, it doesn't. First of all, how do you prove that exclusively the naturalist explanation works? That's what you actually have to do. And then you would have to disprove why the counter explanation of the religious one is impossible or can't work, which rarely are they actually able to do. So it's like, I can explain things with naturalism. Okay, how do you prove naturalism true, the atheism true over theism? That's what this is supposed to be. He said every argument for atheism, not counter narratives or counter explanations. Just positing a counter explanation doesn't necessarily prove that it's true.
doesn't mean that God isn't real.
Again, I agree, because any experience of the brain, whether natural or not in origin, will be describable in terms of brain chemicals. But a better argument is not about what's happening in the brain, but rather what caused the activity in the brain. Sure, love just being chemicals in my brain doesn't prove that my wife...
Oh, sorry. Once again, this is stupid because just like positing a natural domain like chemicals for romantic or spiritual experiences, you can say, well, what caused it? Just because you can find a natural cause for a physical experience doesn't rule out the possibility of also there being a supernatural or spiritual or metaphysical type of cause. So this is really dumb. He spent 2 minutes just talking about how, yes, I would totally agree. Natural things can have an explanation, but that doesn't rule out the possibility of a supernatural explanation or ontology on top of that. And then you say, well, what about what caused it? Well, it's like pointing out a natural cause for a thing doesn't rule out the possibility that there's also a supernatural cause on top of that. God could operate through natural ways. God could use natural cause and effect to exercise his will, right? Very simple explanation. But anyway, so all of his arguments, let's go, and this is kind of understandable, this is kind of expected. All of his arguments were just, I'm going to nitpick Christianity specifically. Well, you didn't do anything to disprove a theoretical flying spaghetti monster religion. You didn't do anything to disprove Islam. And disproving individual religions doesn't disprove universally all religion, which is what you would need to do to prove atheism. And you made no positive case for atheism. You didn't show why naturalism or atheism had to be the case, which is what you have to do. And yeah, so we see the atheist line of argumentation is just extremely weak. Like, I was kind of nervous. I was expecting some new perspectives, but all he did was just nitpick a Redeemed Zoomer video. He didn't prove atheism, right? He just... And I feel like most of his critiques, I've heard them all, they're all extremely... I looked at them, and all of them were extremely basic, extremely elementary, extremely, like, I've heard, oh, there's slavery in the Bible. Like, super level 1 stuff that you could easily get an answer to if you just simply investigated it yourself. I don't know what to say. Like, there's been church fathers who have answers to all these super elementary questions. He could have an answer to them. He just doesn't want to go find it. So I don't know what to say. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but yeah, that's really where the level of discourse is at. It's unfortunate because I've heard people who watch Alex O'Connor who just regurgitate all of his talking points as though it constitutes an argument. Yeah, well, Nietzschean slave morality. Okay, but that doesn't prove Nietzschean slave morality. Just because there's a counter explanation doesn't prove it, you silly Billy. Yeah, that was really disappointing. I don't know about you guys. I feel a little bit bummed out. I was looking for some good arguments. All of them were just really low tier. I started skipping past them once I saw all of them were going to be the same. All of them were just nitpicking specifically Christianity, even though the topic is atheism, right? But anyway, let's head out. Let me know if you guys have any comments, any thoughts, or anything you guys want to see from me in the future. Let me know. I'm gonna head out. Cheers.